caught a very interesting interview with the great former all-time great running back for the Cleveland Browns, Mr. Jim Brown. And he had a nice little interview with a gentleman discussing about his memories with Martin Luther King Jr. and his discussions that he had with him. And basically he talked about the civil rights movement, and he talked about how he disagreed with Martin Luther King. So what I'm going to do is I am going to play the clip so you guys can get this in full content, and then after that I will discuss it. And also, the three things that he talked about: feminist, globalist, and racialist ideology. And also, the other three things that I want to discuss, he also brought up, was understanding the government, understanding the money system, and also understanding your culture. All of these things that I just stated is all in this interview when he talked about Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement.
The civil rights movement had a lot of leaders. Martin was probably the number one leader. And his philosophy was passive resistance. And I am totally against passive resistance or nonviolence. Nonviolence is something that's applicable to all human beings. You know, all of us should not be violent. But that's not movement. A movement is proactive. And so I admired his courage and his sincerity, but I didn't think that nonviolence was a solution to the problem of inequality in America. I thought that nonviolence meant that you'd march and sing, and you would try to appeal to the consciousness of the same people that were discriminating against you. So my concept was, how can you get to the consciousness of a person that has no consciousness and who is relegating you to a second-class citizenship because of your color? So I thought economic development and a sense of cultural power would be a better way to fight, because capitalism in America is riding high, and you need resources. And as I looked at the Jewish community, they applied it fantastically. And as I looked around at the community, the Korean communities, they seem to be applying it. And it seemed that people that took care of themselves and dealt with economic development and had high family values and didn't try to integrate would do a better job of integrating. But integration can't be your goal. And I give an example. If I want to live in a white neighborhood and they jack the prices up, but I want to integrate it for the sake of integrating it, I pay twice as much for the house. That's like paying twice as much to live with white folks. I never thought that was very bad, just living with white folks. I thought, to have my rights under the Constitution. And I would always say to Martin's people, you know, I'm of African descent, I'm an American citizen, I pay my damn taxes, and I want my rights. Underline that, and you can't challenge it. Okay? I'm a citizen, you're a citizen, you pay your taxes, I pay my taxes, you get your rights, I get my rights.
So there you have it. The great Jim Brown speaking about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. You know, all these years I wanted to know what someone else thought about the civil rights movement, especially those who lived during that time, who lived there during that time. And I was not shocked that Jim Brown said what he said, because I'm going to discuss it in full content in the things that he said. But it just made it feel the way that I've always felt about the so-called black man's struggle in this captivity called America. And the captivity of America is based off of not understanding those three things that I am going to talk about. And those three things are not understanding the money system, not understanding the government, and not understanding your culture. Those three things are the key to why black folks in this country are at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to understanding the system in this society. Jim Brown talked about passive resistance. Jim Brown was against passive resistance and nonviolence. Of course, the civil rights movement talked about being sprayed with water hose, being attacked by dogs, and having sit-ins where you're being attacked by white folks and stuff like that. That's what we saw in the civil rights movement when I grew up. When they showed those things, that's all those things that they showed. To him, that is not a movement. A movement is proactive. He also talked about nonviolence is not the solution of equality in America. Like I said before, and I'm going to say it one more time. When it comes to equality, black men, you are not included in equality. Women, especially white women and the LGBTQ community, all are included in equality. You black men are excluded when it comes to equality in this country. And of course, he talked about the economic development and culture empowerment would be the better way to fight, because of capitalism is at a high and is the way of the wealth in America, and you needed resources. Like I said, economic development is what? Understanding the money system. And culture empowerment means what? Understanding your culture. Once again, he talked about these things. He also talked about how the Jews and the Koreans, which I want to put Asians, mastered it when it came to capitalism. We all know that the Jews are on top of the food chain when it comes to the money system, and the Asians come here to this country. They open up businesses, they open up restaurants, they open up shops where you get your hair products, and they also open up places where you get your nails done. They open them up all over this country. He also talked about people who took care of themselves had a high and family value, which means what? Not relying on the government, which says what? Understanding the government. Then he also talked about integration cannot be your goal, and I will talk about that in a few minutes. And he also talked about demand your rights by force. Now, I am not talking about the force that you go around protesting, you go around being mad at white people, and you go around fighting. He's talking about, damn it, I pay my taxes, I pay my dues in this country, I demand my rights. I don't need to march. I live my life through examples of how I live in this country. And the best way the way you live in this country is by paying your taxes and paying your dues in this society. You won't have to protest because you yourself automatically will demand respect and your rights based off of how you are representing yourself in this society. People respect you more when you have a demand for yourself. So once again, kudos to Mr. Jim Brown in talking about the three things that I talked about. Economic development, which is understanding the money system. Culture empowerment, understanding your culture. And people who took care of themselves and had a high economic and family value and not relying on the government, which means is what? Understanding the government and why you don't need it. If black folks actually understood these things, we would not be in the situation that we are in today. And he also talked about, which I said I was going to go back to, the integration cannot be your goal. I put integration into those three things I'm fixing to talk about. Feminist, globalist, and racial ideology. Integration is part of globalism, where everyone come together. That should not be your goal. Your goal is not to come together with everyone. See, the problem with black folks is we have this infatuation of always wanting to come together with people that we claim that is oppressing us. Why would you come together with those that you claim is oppressing you? And this is one of the biggest problems that I talk about on those three things that I talk about. And when we talk about the racial thing, that is including the civil rights movement and also including with the Black Lives Matter movement of today. Civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter movement, they both are the same. Civil rights movement was led by men back in the 50s and 60s and in a little bit of the 70s. Black Lives Matter movement is led by a bunch of lesbian women of today. And they all did the same thing. And it's gotten us nowhere. So I'm sitting here thinking, man, Jim Brown was actually right. If black folks actually follow the economic development, cultural empowerment, and not relying on the government by having high economic values and family values, black people will be dominant today. So kudos to you, Jim Brown. I really appreciate you speaking that. And this is what this society needs to hear today. So thank you, sir. And I appreciate that. Even though this was a couple of years old, but this reigns new to this society today who haven't heard it. So I had to bring it back. And once again, thank you again, Jim Brown.